Welcome to Flipping the Table. In this episode, Michael has a conversation with Slow Money founder Woody Tasch. An outgrowth of the slow food movement, Slow Money is about getting local capital into local farms and food businesses. Today, they discuss Woody's latest book, A Call to Farms, and launch of the Beet Coin initiative on September 11th, 2022. Enjoy the show.
Today, I welcome back a guest from early in season one, Woody Tasch, author, poet, and founder of the Slow Money Institute. Slow Money, an offshoot of the slow food movement, is dedicated to channeling the flow of capital to local food systems, connecting investors to the places where they live, and promoting new principles of fiduciary responsibility in an age where capital controls the globe. The Institute's work rests on 6 pithy principles, 2 of which I particularly love. One is, and I quote, "There is such a thing as money that is too fast, companies that are too big, finance that is too complex. Therefore, we must slow our money down. Not all of it, of course, but enough to matter." The second is, we must learn to invest as if food, farms, and fertility mattered. We must connect investors to the places where they live, creating healthy relationships and new sources of capital for small food enterprises. If just these 2 principles were embraced, there would be monumental changes to food and farming. Because of that, I remain interested in Slow Money and Woody's creatively articulated evangelism. He does not fear to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to the problem of capital. And that's because of his long experience working with it. Before launching Slow Money, Woody was chairman of Investor Circle that facilitated more than $200 million of investments in over 300 early-stage companies that focused on sustainability. Prior to that, he was treasurer of the Jesse Smith Noyce Foundation, where he was a pioneer of mission-related investing. Today, we converse about the latest developments with the Slow Money Institute and the movement that it shepherds, including Woody's recent writing sparked by the Ukraine war and the very real connection it has to capital flows and the need to remake our food and agriculture. We focus on the opportunity of any one of us to take action that will seed expansion of organic and regenerative agriculture and food businesses in our own communities. I hope you'll enjoy the show. Woody Tasch, great to see you. It's been a while since you were, I don't know if you remember this, but you were one of the first persons that I had a conversation with for this podcast.
How could I forget such an auspicious thing?
Yeah, great to have you. We are going to talk today about your recent publication, which I found very compelling and seems so timely and important for us to talk about. Let me just give people the title because I think it says a lot. It's A Call to Farms. That's A Call to Farms. Some thoughts on food, money, and nonviolence in honor of Wendell Berry. And you published that April 2022 at a very important moment. So what is A Call to Farms? And then maybe you'll read something to kind of kick us off.
It would be my pleasure, honor, etc. So when you said published, I just like to clarify. So we distributed it electronically in April, and now a print copy is coming out, will be out by mid-September. Yeah, Call to Farms was one person's attempt to discern at the most fundamental level what he really thought and felt when he heard about mutually assured destruction and nuclear saber rattling. I don't mean to laugh. You have to kind of try to laugh stuff off a little bit because it's so crazy. Just in response to the war, in those first couple of weeks of the invasion of Ukraine, I'm of a certain age. We can just label it a baby boomer if you'd like. But, having kind of been a young man during or just a pre-adolescent during the Cuban Missile Crisis, just entering adolescence, and then living through that period of time, all the issues of, the potential of nuclear holocaust, and growing up as a kid post-World War II, being aware of all that, and then just being forced back into all that by recent events in a certain way that we maybe hadn't been for a while. It was always there, obviously, but somehow this, you're nodding, and I know people listening are probably nodding. So anyhow, I was just very distraught, and I thought, I want to figure out, like, what do I really, like, what do I think? How do I cope with this? And so I wrote the Call to Farms, and when I shared it with a few friends, it resonated enough with them that I stuck with it and finished it and distributed it. So it's turned into a little bit of a thing. It's being translated into several languages, et cetera. But basically, I'd say it's from the point of view of, let's say, the food movement, just to use a silo for a second. I would say, I guess what I learned from the process of writing it is that I really do believe at its roots, if I can use that metaphor, the food movement is also a peace movement. It's about healing. It's about reconnecting to one another and the land. It's about taking care of one another. This is basically, it's the opposite of killing each other. And that's why we want to try to grow food without killing things, et cetera, et cetera.
So good. Why don't you read the opening? I think it sets context.
This is a call to farms. It is and is not a response. It is not a response to any one brigade's route, the military mind that mapped it, or the propaganda that is translating it into ideological talking points. It is a response to the forces that turned low these few brief millennia, and lower these few brief centuries, and lower yet these few brief decades, these few brief tweets, these few brief algorithmic breaths, these few brief ultra-fast bursts of ones and zeros, the fertile crescent into the oil patch, and amber waves of grain into food as a store of cheap, shelf-stable calories, food as fuel for internal combustion engines, food as industrial power. This is a call to farms because there is healing to be done, trust to be restored, mutuality to be rekindled, biodiversity to be valued, conviviality to be nurtured, carbon to be sequestered, bread to be broken, affection to be shared, humility to be cultivated.
Beautiful. And
so that last list, I always smile when I look at it, because it's very simple. I mean, relatively simple. This is the thing that continually amazes me about local food systems, and the thing that I'm really focused on, that those of us in Slow Money are focused on, kind of community-supported agriculture, new ways of coming together that, let's say, break the mold of what we used to think about as, let's say, investing on one hand and philanthropy on the other, or capitalism and socialism, if we want to be a little grander about the framework. It's just so fundamental, just coming together in a direct, personal, local way to take care of one another, and letting the money part kind of recede into the background, not being agnostic about, like, how much is it cost? How much are we going to make? How fast are we going to get the returns? And I know in the course of the podcast, we'll get into the 0% loan thing that's obviously flows from everything I just said. But I hope we are going to be able to get the food movement from just being just for foodies and about food to that plus all the other things that it's really about.
Yeah, that does seem really important. It's certainly what I'm focused on as well. Like, how do you scale something so that it has actual power and creates the transformation that's required? Before we started this podcast, we were talking about the system of finance and how challenging it is to actually create transformation, because it has so much gravity that pulls people into a certain way of thinking. Because what you're really talking about is how the change in thinking has to be manifest. And it really comes down to values, it seems to me. Those things that you read at the end of that list, those are different values than profit, power. Mm-hmm. It's about relationship. So I want to ask you a question. You dedicated this to Wendell Berry. Tell us why.
Well, there's a very specific reference that is in the title. For true aficionados of Wendell, they'll recognize it. he wrote an essay in 1969 called, and I always bastardize the title. I think it's called Some Thoughts on Citizenship and Conscience in Honor of Donald Pratt. That's pretty close. I should know it by now since I kind of dedicated this piece to it.
Yeah, it's actually in the document.
It's in the call to farms. And Donald Pratt was a student at the University of Kentucky when Wendell was teaching English there. And he got arrested. The student got arrested for protesting the war in Vietnam. And then Wendell wrote this piece in honor about conscientious objection. And it's extremely moving. It was one of Wendell's early essays. It was published in his first collection of essays. I read it soon after it came out, and it just never left me. And that essay is still one of the most moving. You know, Wendell's writing is very moving in many, many, many ways. But this one, to me, just reflecting on what it means to protest. And one of the themes in the piece is protest itself is not enough. You have to change the way you live. You have to reassess your values. You have to reduce your complicity in the broken system. By the way, anything I say does not do honor to Wendell Berry's essay, but we just have to stipulate that. So given the theme there of the war and whatever, and the war in Ukraine, that's what specifically brought me back to it, and that's where the form came. The piece has 23 Roman numeral sections in it too, which is something I probably bastardized from Wendell a little bit, so I have to apologize to him for that. But several of his pieces come out that way because it's kind of meditative. It takes different shots at the target, if we can use a military metaphor, rather than just one discourse. You know, it kind of takes different approaches and tries to weave them together into
different lenses, different tones. It's almost like painting. I mean, as I was reading, I was thinking, yeah, okay, this is one color, this is another color, this is a different color.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It even does have two of the 23 sections are poetry, actually.
That's right. I was going to say it does include actual poems that you pen to express what you're feeling. One of the things I really realized is the fact that you were in pain from what you were experiencing. I mean, I think a lot of people could relate to that. There's a lot. I mean, given the last decade or more, 2 decades, I mean, the level of pain, anxiety, angst in the world is huge. And it is giving people opportunity. It's giving pause. What I see is that people they know something has to change. And the question is what? And so what you're trying to do here, seems to me, is offer a pathway. So maybe that gets us into, just to remind people, I'm going to, I mean, it's going to be clear from the introduction what slow money is, but just talk to us about the link between this call to farms, Beet Coin, and the primary mission of slow money right now.
Yeah, we haven't mentioned Beet Coin yet. This is just a part of a conversation that, let's say, I've been participating in and sometimes instigating, this way for the last dozen years. I was at it for a long time before that in different iterations. But since the Slow Money book came out in 2009, a lot of us have been at it. And it's really important. I'm glad you kind of went there at this point before we go too much further, because there's action tied to this. This isn't, it's a funny thing. And Michael, you and I are dear friends and colleagues and everything. So I'm just going to make believe everyone listening is going to let us talk that way. When you dare to talk poetically or even just philosophically, if we just use some of these labels for ways of trying to make meaning out of things, and then you try to talk about money, all kinds of things happen. Some of them are truly beautiful, or at least I think they are. And I would say, if we just go to the action, the over $80 million that's gone to 800 small farms and food enterprises in dozens of communities since Slow Money began as a little movement, with no formal intermediation, no fund, no one person in charge, but just local self-organized volunteer efforts in a lot of communities. That's pretty beautiful. I think it's okay to call that beautiful.
Yes.
It's not nearly enough, but it is enough in a way. If you just say it's a beautiful thing, it's a seed, it's a start, it's a beautiful manifestation of energy.
Isn't it also a demonstration?
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. So if we just follow that through, just to say to where we are now, that's been going on for a dozen years in that kind of very informal, volunteer-led activities. Most of that $80 million plus was, almost all of it was in low interest loans, considerably below market, often without collateral, things that would seem crazy to a traditional financial profit maximizing investor, obviously. And that led me over the last several years to keep kind of turning the compost pile a little bit and go, well, how do we do this a little better? The better isn't exactly the right word. How might there be other ways to do this, and other tools, other fields we can cultivate? I'm stuck on all the agricultural metaphors. That's why my mind works at this point, because I think they're beautiful ways to think. So what might they be? And so gradually, a number of us came up with this model, which is now working in 5 places. Before I tell you what the model is, I'll just say quickly, $2 million has been invested in, has been loaned in 0% loans to 70 plus farms in 5 different places using this model. And this is where I'm really focusing my energy going forward. And
0%. Just say that again. 0%.
So what we have is we finally kind of, let's say, put 1.5 feet over the line. We've always been on this line between investing and philanthropy. Like, where's the boundary? How much of this? How do you measure that? How much risk for how much return? Well, so now a bunch of us have landed on the following model. We're donating our money into local pools in amounts ranging from $250 to no upper limit. The largest individual donation has been $50,000 so far. Unless you're a farmer, you can join for a lot less, for $25 usually, because we want everyone in the group to have some skin in the game, be a member. Then every member votes on where we're going, making the 0%, and we're making 0% loans to small organic farms and small food businesses that are building local food systems. It's a very, very ultra democratic, participatory, inclusive thing. And the beauty of the model, from my thinking, is it creates a slow, circulating, permanent pool of capital in the community. You make the 0% loans, you lose some of them, but not many. So far, we've had very good success, but over time, you're going to lose some loans, but you get back the supermajority of them. Money keeps coming in from members every year. You keep making the 0% loans, and gradually you're going to have a pool of capital that can do a little more. Meanwhile, you're engaging scores or hundreds of people in the community. You're connecting them directly to farms and food businesses and whatnot. So if you just let me say one more thing, takes a little while to explain it, which is going to be interesting to see what that means going forward. But it led us to, okay, that's good. Now, how do we get more money flowing into this system? How do we prime the pump? Because to anybody who knows anything about organizing or finance, knows that what I just described, while it maybe sounds like a beautiful model in some ways, would be quite inefficient. Like, how do you get the groups organized? Who makes the loan decisions? How do you get members to come in every year? There's a lot of local organizing there. And so, having played a principal role in starting 4 of the 5 groups that now exist, I learned something from the process that, okay, we need some subsidy at the beginning. We just need some chunks of money in here to get the pump primed. So that's where Beet Coin comes in. We're going to market officially on 9/11 when we have an event called Call to Farms. It's just going to be a little somewhat arbitrary starting point for us. And we've been testing for a while and tweaking and doing some things on the site. We have a new site going live on 9/11, and we're going to see if we can grow an international flow of small donations to drop into this system, to go to local groups that are making 0% loans, to help us start new groups and grow the groups around the world. We'd like to see hundreds of these groups as quickly as possible. I'd say obviously, just given the urgency of the global situation, we'd like to see this take and maybe become as viable as even land trusts or CSAs or whatever these other models are that we might use as ways of doing things that have replicated over the last several decades.
So it's what you created is an alternative financial engine that breaks people out of what you called the complicit paradigm, basically the system where once you get into it, you can't help but become complicit because the system is so strong. And I'm talking about basically global capital and finance. You're saying that you're trying to create a system that's really locally based. Locally, the mind share is local, that's deciding where the money goes. It's based on actual relationship. I know you've written a lot and spoken a lot about the fact that we throw our monies into these mutual funds and we have no idea what the hell we're really invested in. We can read the fine print about them all, but we don't know any relationship. We don't know the person who's actually investing our money. We know nothing about the people that are running the companies, really. Maybe the CEO, because they're making the news, oftentimes because they're corrupt. But, it's a very interesting challenge. You're providing an alternative. And so the vision is that on September 11th, the Call to Farms event will take place. and it will be a request for people to make donations into a pool that you'll use to
I want to stop one little thing short of that, because I don't want people to hear this and go, oh my God, I don't want to go on there because I don't want to make a donation. The first thing is the call to farms means it's a call to think differently and engage and be willing to commit yourself in some way to what you just said, to the creation of new economic visions or new economic experiments. I don't think anybody who's still listening to this podcast, by definition, will care enough about food or the need for a new economic vision of some kind that they're at least willing to entertain the idea of experimentation, trying new things, trying to find new solutions. So the very first thing is, I'm not, everyone in the world isn't going to wake up and want to make a $25 donation to Beet Coin, but I'd like to think millions of people would resonate with what we're talking about and say, we got to try something. Yes, it's better to try something. The perfect is the enemy of the good. Let's get going. Now, once you go there, then you go, okay, am I going to place all my bets in Silicon Valley, Wall Street, or Washington? I'd also like to hope that millions of people, we can stipulate, don't feel comfortable placing all their bets there. And that's to the point you were just making, that when you go through the big institutional routes, it doesn't matter what the bells and whistles are that are put on it. Now, I'm speaking a little, I could piss a few people off if I keep going on this, but I will, not because I'm trying to piss them off. This is what I feel. The best intentioned foundation investment policy, the best intentioned regulation, the best intentioned certification, the best intentioned annual report to explain why regenerative this and that's going to happen over here and there as part of a multi-billion-dollar multinational corporation. All of that stuff has to be done. I'm not against it. No one could be against greening and making less destructive those engines. I mean, we have to do that. I think the question is, how much energy are we also going to have to do the thing at the local level, just to roll our sleeves up? I remember Carlo Petrini. I'm looking at you, so I can't help but think about Carlo and some of the interesting memories. So I invited Carlo Petrini, the founder of Slow Food, to speak at an investor circle lunch in San Francisco about 15 years ago. Might be longer ago now. And I was nurturing inside Investor Circle. I was CEO at the time, and we were, it's an angel network that looking for green, socially responsible companies. And I was nurturing the organic food discussion inside Investor Circle, and Carlo came to speak. And he stood up and raised his hands and said in Italian, in his inimitable fashion, which was so eloquent you could almost understand him in English, "Our fate is in the hands of idiots." And I've already written about this, and I think our fate, yes, to some extent, and it's also in the hands of fiduciaries. It's in the hands of investment managers. It's in the hands of all kinds of other people who are far from idiots. They're extremely intelligent, but they're implying their intelligence in a very narrow way, and that way is to generate returns and economic growth. So everything you do under that thing is a thing. Coming back to the way you prompted this is, we are putting that aside for part of our day, a meaningful part for me, but just for some of our consciousness, say, I want to think outside that paradigm, because deep down, I have a very strong suspicion. This is now my cue to read my next thing, because it goes right into
I was about to get to that.
This suspicion that as long as I stay in that paradigm, we're never going to get everything done. We might not get most of what needs to be done. That's a little more radical way of saying it, but we're certainly not going to get everything done. So I just prompted myself. I'm just going to read this paragraph from Call to Farms.
Good.
What impels us is not just the desire to know our local farmers, although knowing them is surely a good thing. What impels us is not just the desire for fresh, toxin-free food and carbon-rich soil, although these are surely goods of the highest order too. What impels us is not just the desire to reduce the outsourcing of food production to corporations controlled by invisible shareholders, although enhancing local control of food and reducing the extent of our dependence on global supply chains is surely a worthy pursuit. What impels us is the deepest of suspicions that structural reform is needed and that it may never be possible from the top down. When we send our money to Wall Street, Washington, and Silicon Valley, it doesn't readily come back in ways that can repair the damage done by the sending.
Yeah, that's interesting. It reminds me also of framing that you have used a lot in the past about the speed of money. And you were prompted to write A Call to Farms because of the war in the Ukraine. In the beginning of the document, there is an image of children, boys playing with plastic soldiers, which I did because I was born in 58. So World War II was a big thing still in people's minds. And so I played with toy soldiers all the time. And I think of the mentality that was in our culture that bent me to do that in a certain way, prompted me to do that, cultivated that in me in a certain way by the gifts I was given. But it made me think of the phrase speed kills, because I was thinking of the connection of going to war and the connection of money and war and the military industrial complex and how much money is made from war. I mean, it's an incredible amount of money. So there is a link between being disconnected from where your money is going, because some of it's going to end up, because it moves so fast and so far, it's going to end up fueling war.
Yeah, that's one way of stating the issue, and certainly stating it in a way which is, let's say, referred to in this essay.
Yes.
And I do go back to Thoreau's civil disobedience essay, because Wendell's essay about Donald Pratt to me was like a direct or indirect, I don't know which it was, kind of pulling of that thread forward. Mm-hmm. And in the Thoreau essay, that's exactly what he's talking about. He was talking about his taxes going to fund the war with Mexico.
Yeah, it's really great.
And he was being a conscientious objector. He was refusing to pay his taxes because a portion of it was going to war with Mexico. So yeah, it's quite remarkable. And this is not usually, in the time that I've been doing what I'm doing, and which has brought us together as friends and whatnot, you hardly ever really talk about the military-industrial complex. I mean, first, forget the fact those words are never said anymore.
Right.
Kind of like those are like 60s and 70s or 70s words. We don't say them anymore. Well, they were 1960s.
I was going to say they were hatched by Eisenhower's farewell address.
It was Ike's farewell address, which most people, it's good to remind everybody that. So, look, to say it's a real thing is like such an understatement. The militarization of the economy, the dependence of the economy directly on militarism. Okay, that's obvious. We could go through and say percentage of the U.S. budget, each Tomahawk missile costs $1 million. Well, where does that $1 million go? It goes to the people who manufacture the Tomahawk missile and their shareholders, meaning indirectly everybody who's invested in a pension fund that's invested, So it's all one big mishmash of stuff, which leads to all kinds of, let's say, oxymorons, contradictions, moral dilemmas, if you want to pay attention to it. But most of us are trained never to pay attention to that. It doesn't come up because it's just so embedded. It's so too complicated. It's just the way it is. We need the army. We need nuclear weapons for deterrence. We need cheap food to feed the masses. We need cars to drive around, all these different things that are all interwoven into like petrochemical, synthetic stuff, manufacturing, pollution, and war are treated, because they're economic necessities. It's like, how much do you want to think about it? Because you just get beyond a headache, right? So that's true.
Where you end up,
yeah.
This is what I'm really seeing more and more. You end up in fear.
Absolutely.
It strikes fear at the heart of all of us, because the system we know is not functioning. And it's like, what is the alternative?
We hope you're enjoying the conversation. If you are, please rate our podcast and offer a review. Your voice will help us grow our listener base, which helps us sustain the funding to share these conversations with the people and organizations shaping a more just and regenerative future. A future in which the food and farm businesses are helping to solve the largest challenges of our time.
I want to go back to this idea that there are alternatives. My sense is that the thing we need to convince people of is that there are alternatives and we need to give them a chance. And that's what you're trying to do here.
That was a very polite way of trying to bring the conversation back down to earth, which I respect greatly, because but this is what we're doing. We're allowing ourselves to have the big conversations and let that stuff vent and acknowledge how daunting that all is. And then you say, well, this is the beauty. I'm sorry, it makes it sound like I'm promoting my NGO or my action, Slow Money and Beet Coin, but I do feel like we are onto a thing that has real value. And it has value because of what you're saying. It's a thing you can do that is actually friggin', if I can say that word, simple. It's simple. Oh, I'll put a few $100 into a thing and then I'll go to a few meetings and make 0% loans to farmers in my county. Yeah. Wow.
I'm going to do it.
That's pretty simple. Now, it's not, I've written a number of times about how crazy our world is, that the simplest things seem the most complicated and the most complicated seem the simplest, right? So like, trading a share of Alibaba stock in the middle of the night is actually simpler than making a loan to a farmer down the street. That's how cockamamie everything is, right? Everything's inverted. So, but I appreciate your cue to kind of come down to the ground, because the actions are remarkably simple. And the craziest part of it is it's fun. It's actually fun. I know I'm not allowed to use the word fun because it seems like it's not serious, but it is serious. So I often use the term lively serious as opposed to deadly serious. So this is seriously fun. How about that? I just made that up for today. This is seriously fun because when you are in a room with 30 people talking to a farmer and deciding as a group to make that farmer a 0% loan, that you cannot describe the smiles. Hopefully they don't need to be described. People can intuit what they are. That is real. That is real. We just have to make it real more often. We just have to do more of it. So I would encourage anybody who's listening, since we're about to do this 9/11 thing, this Call to Farms event, and since we are now officially launching Beet Coin and seeking, kind of goes back to where you were a few minutes ago, like, yes, of course we want people to donate. But what we really want is a large number of people to say, yes, let's try to figure out how to do this. So it could be anything. It could be, I can only put $5 in, or I'm not in a position to put anything in. I will pass the essay to a friend. I'll
cook a meal for the people who come together.
Yeah, exactly. There's all different levels of engagement. The reason for Beet Coin, and I hope people are curious about the name and what it means, so check it out, beetcoin.org, is a...
That's B-E-E-T.
Yes, just like it sounds, like the vegetable.
Right. Beetcoin.org.
Because we do want to try to create a way for people who don't have a ton of time, maybe aren't going to go to any local meetings, or maybe won't even read a short book. This Call to Farms book is only 60 pages, but they want to say, yes, make this so, go for it. I really like you. I like what you're trying to do. I think it's a worthy experiment. It's an experiment. It's a beautiful experiment. We know some good will come out of it. It's a good experiment in that way. There's no such thing as total failure. We're going to get the money to some local groups. We're going to get the money to some farmers. The question is, can we do it enough to actually, like, say, begin moving a needle a little bit? We all know what that means. And that depends on how the next couple of years goes.
Yeah. Well, it kind of gets me to, I guess it's the idea or the hope, really, that we are going to be able to ignite enough change in the system to get us to a new world. I mean, that's really what this is all about. So what's going to happen in the Call to Farms event? Can you describe it at all?
Oh, sure. Thank you for asking that. It's just an hour-and-a-half event. It's free.
It's on Zoom.
We will have me and 8 roundtable participants, a really beautiful group of people. Sorry, I keep using the word beautiful.
All right.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to use that word that often these days. So I guess maybe I'm desperate.
It's an antidote. Keep doing it. Go ahead.
Yeah, but it's very, let's say, eclectic, diverse, multi-generational.
Can you name any of them?
Well, there's maybe only one name there that's kind of sort of famous enough for everyone to know who it is. That's Winona LaDuke. Mm-hmm. But everybody on there, we have a Fulbright scholar from Italy on economics and a former CEO, Leslie Christian, who was the first CEO of Portfolio 21, one of the very early green investment funds. And we have Jack Algier, who's the farmer at Stone Barns Center for Sustainable Agriculture. And I'm going to leave some people out. So it's a really great group of people. I mean, I'm very honored. I'm saying that from the point of view of being honored that they were willing to come together to do this. I'm going to go a little deeper. I don't want to scare anybody off into the Call to Farms thing at the beginning, and then just have a roundtable discussion with them about these issues: nonviolence, localization, food systems. How do we create social change? The same topics you and I are speaking about right now, but we'll have it as a discussion with a really interesting and very diverse and intelligent group of people. We'll take questions from the chat room, obviously. It looks like we're going to have quite a crowd on there. So we suspected it might be too big to keep everybody on a Zoom call live with everybody raising their hand and stuff. So just do the chat room. And then we'll see. I just want to add one other thing, which is for those who are hearing this and don't know anything about slow money in the past, I'll just say we had a number of large national meetings, and the doing of the thing, the tens of millions of dollars changing hand, required zillions of meetings, all kinds of small local meetings of all kinds. So meetings were very much a part of what we've been doing. But then when COVID hit, obviously we went through the same thing everybody went through. And it's gradually dawning on me that maybe we can use Zoom in new ways. As tired as everybody is with Zoom, yes, got it, we're all there. And for certain kinds of things, it's still highly effective because it allows for quick, carbon-free, ease of interactions. And so we've done a series of what we call Beet Coin dialogues during the winter. People could see them if they want to. They're hour-long conversations with mostly farmers, occasional financier, about these issues. We did them during the winter. They're free. They're available at beetcoin.org. They're curated there. But this meeting is an attempt to expand the program a little bit and see if we can get a little bit of the magic that we had when we got hundreds of people together in a big room, which I know you can't quite do on online, but we're just going to take a shot. I'm sure it'll be an interesting conversation because of the quality of the people. And you said earlier, what would success look like? I think it's kind of obvious. I hope this will be a boink forward for us all in this journey, that it'll be a way of engaging several hundred new people in the Beet Coin idea, that will start getting the word out there. And I can report there are a few new 0% loan groups locally in the wings right now. And so some of their members will be on the call. So hopefully it'll just inspire the next wave of work on the ground in some locales.
That's fabulous. Now, can more people sign up to watch this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
How would they do that?
Again, it's free. It's free online. You just go to beetcoin.org and you'll see a little banner across the top that says Call to Farmers Event. You shouldn't have any trouble registering. But if you do, you can, I'm going to do the unthinkable. I'm going to say my own direct email address on this podcast. And I'd certainly like to, actually, I don't mind. I'd like to hear from anyone who thinks these ideas are worth talking about in any way, shape, or form. It's woody@slowmoney.org.
Mm-hmm. WOODY.
Yep.
Okay. Great. What I'd like you to do is read. There was a third piece that I was hoping you might read as a way to kind of close the conversation, which has been really, really rich. And I'm quite hopeful. I've been a believer in the work that you've been doing since the beginning. And I'm glad to hear more than $80 million has come out into the community to fund businesses that are connected to healthy food and farming because of slow money. And now it could be a quantum leap. It could be, if Beet Coin takes off, it could be a quantum leap. So that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, we didn't talk about, and I'm just going to hold it out there as a topic that people can recognize. And that is, why are we treating small organic farms as if they're expendable? Now, when I'm saying it that way, I mean we, meaning the economy, the modern economy.
Right.
Okay. How did that happen? When they generate so many benefits, both immediate and long-term, social and ecological benefits, and yet the economy treats them as if they're expendable. And then if you go right from there to the next thing, which is, okay, let's say I buy it, that we want to try to preserve and restore small organic farms and local food systems. That's a philanthropy thing. That should be philanthropy because the markets don't do it. Well, even if that were true, that was the best way to do it, it's axiomatic that philanthropy isn't doing it. There's not enough philanthropy. That's not an indictment of philanthropy for me to say that. It's just a recognition of the reality of the way dollars flow. So very little of overall philanthropy goes to anything to do with the environment. Within that, only a small sliver goes to food systems under the environment. And under that, almost nothing in any organized way goes to small organic farms and local food systems. It's like a smidgen of a smidgen of a smidgen of a smidgen. So that's the entrepreneurial reason to try what we're trying. It's like, come on, people, we can do it. Institutionally, it's almost impossible. Personally and individually, it's entirely possible. So towards the end of Call to Farms, I managed to write a paragraph that just kind of says the whole thing in a few sentences. And it just reads as follows. The question before us then is not only how we will mobilize to redress the immediate harm done by the current militarism and violence. The question is also how we will plant the seeds of a peaceable economy. There is no more fundamental place to start than with how we grow food, how we feed ourselves and one another, how we relate to and care for the land. Okay. Any questions? Any further questions?
Of course.
I think we covered everything. I find myself thinking to one thing in here, just because of the way you ask the questions, Michael. The whole thing of like, if you talk like this, what does that mean? Does that make you like not a capitalist? Does it make you a socialist? Does it make you a Luddite? Does it make you a Malthusian? Whatever all those labels are that we can put on each other that are like ideological labels that come from economic schools of thought. And they're all outdated. This is how I feel. They are all outdated.
I agree.
None of them respond to the emergency of the 21st century. So if you kind of know that, you have a choice. You just default to, yeah, but there's nothing else we can do. Capitalism is better than socialism, so I'm just going to keep being a capitalist. I do always tell people that slow money is a highly sociable form of capitalism when we get into this discussion. Mm-hmm. But really, I think it's something more fundamental than that. It's just a desire to act in a way which is outside of all economic ideology and just start taking care of one another and realizing we have some money. There's something good we can do with it. It's hard to put a label on it. Obviously, slow money is another label. It's a kind of a thing. But this is just, let's get some money to farmers down the street who need it, because we know there are a lot of benefits that are going to come to that, not to us as investors, but to us as community members, to us as citizens of planet Earth. And unfortunately, the crisis is of such a magnitude today that I think it calls us to try to step outside of all the ideologies. I don't know if that added anything to our conversation.
No, that's well said. I appreciate it, because I think it is. I remember a section of A Call to Farms where you say, this is part capitalism, part socialism, part blah, 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 blah. I mean, because it is. And I think that you started this little riff here with the idea that in polite company in the financial world, when you start talking this way, it's very hard for people to get, because it's not the way they think, or it's not the language they used. It's because we're creating something new. And when you're creating something new, there is no language for it. You're actually emerging the language, and it becomes familiarized over, or the term I like in my world of doing policy work, we talk about socializing an idea. We go out and start talking to people. You're socializing this concept of how to build a local economy that supports a sustainable, healthy, just food system in a community. And I've always believed that we can't really change the system unless we change the cells in the system. And this is a really great example of how you change the cells in a community. So well done. And can't wait to get a hard copy of the Call to Arms. And I will certainly be there at 9.
Call to Farms. Come on.
What did I say? Call to Arms?
You said Call to Arms. That's okay. Hey, after 12 years of people going slow food or slow money, which is it?
Call to Farms. Thank you. Yeah, the mind. So, I'm really, really happy for you that you've come to this place. I'm really happy to support and be there and to get this podcast out before it. And appreciate your time, Woody. Thanks very much.
Michael, you know how much I appreciate you, our friendship, et cetera. So thank you.
Thank you for listening, and thank you to our sponsors, the Ladybug Foundation, Dan and Quincy Imhoff, Beth and Mark Wyatt, Cindy Daniel, and Doug Lipton. Roots of Change is a program of the Public Health Institute.